Right, good morning to all of you. Welcome to Operating Systems course module. So, in this course module, we will study on the basic operations, requirements, and the goals of an operating system. So, there are a lot of things to discuss in operating system because it acts as a coordinator between the hardware and the user applications. So when it comes to connecting the user applications and the hardware, so there are a lot of things to consider. So in this chapter we will cover the basic overview of an operating system, and what we are going to cover in this course module. These are the logistics of this course module. So the textbook is already uploaded into the learning management system, so you can refer to it. And there's another book you can refer as an alternative textbook. So actually you can find all the necessary resources even in the internet when you search for certain topics or subsections. And so this is how the marks are distributed. So there are assignments, 30% will be given for the assignments and 70% will be given to the final examination. So this is the course outline of this module. Chapter 1, we will give you an introduction of the definition of an operating system, what are the structures available, designs, and what are the main goals and objectives of an operating system, and what are the topics that we will cover. So mainly these are the topics that we will cover in the course module. So in chapter 2 we will see the different operating system designs based on different goals. As you know, there are operating systems for mobile devices, there are operating systems for PCs, there are operating systems for servers. So like this, we have different types of operating systems based on different user requirements. So we'll see different structures, the advantages and disadvantages in the second chapter. So in the third chapter, we will see the basic uh, operations of a process. So what is a process? What are the components that is required for a process? How to execute? And what are the different stages of a process? And so in an operating system, there are multiple processes running in a given particular instance. So that is how a modern operating system works today. So based on this different type of processes, they communicate each other as well. So we call it as inter-process communication. So we'll see how the inter-process communication happens, and what are the benefits as well as certain uh, issues and how the issues can be solved. So in chapter 4 we will discuss on threads, because today modern operating systems works on a multi-threaded environment. Because in chapter 3 you will see the disadvantage of having multiple processors. So we need to allocate the necessary resources for each process. So instead of creating processors, we can create threads. So those are task specific, and based on different requirements, we can create threads which are lightweight, low cost, and can be easily managed. So we'll see what are the different thread models available, their advantages and disadvantages, as well as different operating systems implement threads in different ways. So we'll see how they are implemented in chapter 4. In chapter 5, we will discuss on CPU scheduling. So a CPU will give a chance to the process to execute. So if there's a single CPU, in a given instance, only a single process can execute. When we have multiple CPUs, there can be multiple processes executing parallel. So we'll see how a CPU can be scheduled, because a PC should give maximum output. Therefore, operating system should look into give maximum utilization, quick response. We have to rotate the available processors to give the requirements running for the user. So there are a lot of requirements in the usage of the CPU. So we'll see how a CPU can be scheduled to satisfy the user requirements. And in chapter 6, we will discuss on process synchronization. Process synchronization means when there are multiple processors running in operating system, they need to communicate each other to complete a specific task. So based on sharing certain data, there can be certain synchronization problems. Now, for example, when two processors share an integer, so two processors might do different operations. One might add two integers, one might get the difference. So if the processors are not properly synchronized, we might get wrong answers. So in chapter 6, we will see what is process synchronization, what are the problems, and how operating system is given the facility to manage the proper process synchronization. And in chapter 7, we will discuss about deadlocks. So what is a deadlock? So simply, you might have already experienced when an operating system gets stuck, we cannot do anything. So in that case, there's a possibility of a deadlock. So in normal usage, we call it as a system getting stuck. So the actual definition for a deadlock is when the system is at a halt. So the system is at a halt, that no process can proceed further, and the operating system cannot function anymore. So we'll see different scenarios of a deadlocks, and different methods of identifying a deadlock, how to come out of a deadlock, as well as what are the available techniques to prevent a deadlock. So in chapter 8, we will discuss about the main memory. So main memory is very important. So it should be managed properly, because from the CPU, main memory is the lowest available in the memory hierarchy, where we can directly access from the CPU. So in main memory, the main issue is we have limited storage. So we have multiple processors, multiple applications running in, so we have to manage the memory properly. So we'll see how a memory is managed properly and what are the advantages as well as disadvantages. In chapter 9 we will discuss about virtual memory. So that is also a very important component in the operating systems. So we'll see what is virtual memory, how the virtual memory is managed, and so what is the mechanism of combining the main memory into the virtual memory using a operating system. And at the end we will discuss about file systems in chapter 10. So how the files are managed inside a computer. Different operating systems will have different file systems. So some might not support certain file systems for different operating systems. So we'll see the basic file systems, the advantages and disadvantages. So in chapter 1 we will discuss about these detail. So what is an operating system, what does it do, what are the different components and how it is structured properly, and what are the main operations available in the operating system, and the main uh, operations we will discuss uh, to in detail, like process management, memory management, storage management, and the the computer system should be protected from inside and outside threats. So we'll talk about protection and security, and we will discuss at the end on different types of operating systems like distributed operating systems, special purpose, and what are the computing environments, and then finally what are the open source operating systems available and what are the advantages of using them. So why do we need an operating system? So, and also we have to define an operating system. So this is a simple definition for operating system: a program that acts as an intermediary between a user of a computer and the computer hardware. So that is the simplest of a definition for a operating system. So when we consider the goals of an operating system, we can have number of goals. As you can see, it's available in this slide. Execute user programs and make solving user problems easier, and make the computer system convenient to use. The user use the computer hardware in an efficient manner and improve the overall system reliability and provide isolation, security and protection among user programs. So when we take one by one of these operating system goals, so the first goal is to facilitate the end user. So end user may have many requirements, so the operating system should be able to facilitate most of the requirements. And the computer system should be convenient for the user. So it cannot have any complex systems for the users that make him to give more effort to use the computer for a particular task. So it should be simple and it should be convenient for the user, and it should use the hardware components properly and efficient manner. So because when you see today's hardware, right, so we have lot of resources, right? So if it is not managed properly, then it is not worth of using an operating system properly, right? So um, improving overall system reliability means the system should always give correct results for the user's requirements. So we have to minimize the errors that happens inside the operating system. And the last goal, it's very important: isolation, security and protection. So that means we have to protect the users and the operating system from inside and outside threats. So what are the inside threats? Some users might be able to log in and take other people's private data or private documents. So we have to isolate each user and their private data. But also we should provide the facility for the user to use the available services inside the operating system. So both has to be there. So there should be facility to use the available services, as well as each user's private data and documents should be protected. Then external threats. So externally, the viruses, all the malware can come through as external threats. So we have to protect the system, internal and external threats. So like that, those are the goals of a operating system. Right. So why should we study operating systems? What do you think? Is it because this is a compulsory subject? So these are the possible answers, some of the possible answers. So you need to understand the interaction between hardware and the user applications, because for the end user we use applications, right? For an example, when we use the PowerPoint presentation, Word documents, movie player, a database, so those are front-end applications. So hardware, we have keyboard, touchpad or mouse, then we have hard disk, memory, display devices. So those are hardware. So when we execute certain commands on the applications, those will be directed to the hardware through the operating system. So how it is linked, what is the relationship between the user applications and the hardware? So those are managed and controlled by the operating system. So that is very important. So you need to understand the basic principles of the design of computer systems. So different requirements will have different designs. For example, when you consider a standard PC, we need to run certain basic applications, right? Day-to-day applications. So most of the users are like that. So we would like to run, let's say we want to process a document, we need to prepare a presentation, we need to listen to music, we need to watch a movie. Those are basic requirements. So for the basic requirements, there's a computer system designed for that particular purpose. For a special requirement, for example, for a web server, we have different set of goals. So based on that, the design will be different. So we need to understand the basic principles of the design and how it can be extended for different specific operating system requirements. Then increasing the need for specialized operating systems, as I mentioned earlier. So how do we make specialized operating systems For an example, for mobile devices, for servers, so distributed systems. So like that, for different requirements we need to extend into specialized operating systems. Right, so when we consider a computer system, there are four main components. That is hardware, operating system, application programs, and the end users. So when we consider these four components, hardware includes CPU, memory, input-output devices, right? Storage, so like that. So those are the available resources. And then when we consider application programs are available for the end user. For an example, word processors, web browsers, compilers, games, uh, databases, right? So like this. So those are application programs. So to connect the application programs to the hardware, we need proper coordination and controlling. So those will be provided by the operating system uh, functionality. So these are the four components. So these components you can see in this diagram clearly. So sometimes there can be a multi-user environment. So for an example, a particular computer system will be used by multiple users. So different users also will have different requirements. So one might use a text editor, one might use a compiler, another person may use a database system, and those are connected to the uh, operating system through a particular service called system calls. So the operating system will identify the particular command that want to access the hardware through the system call, then it will be directed to the hardware for the operation. So that is how the components are connected to each other. So we will go through in detail in this particular course module how an operating system works and how it is connected. So there are some more definitions for an operating system. So some define an operating system as a resource allocator. So this is also true because the operating system will manage all the hardware. So hardware are the resources available in the computer system where the users can use. So the resources should be managed and controlled properly, and that is being handled by the operating system. So it will decide what ways that we can use to manage the hardware, the mechanisms to control the hardware, and fair usage of resources. In a multi-user environment, many users might request the same set of resources again and again. So when a particular person is using for a particular process a number of resources for a longer time, then we have to stop the use and give a fair chance to the other user processes as well. So that is being handled by the operating system. So that is why some people call operating system as a resource allocator. Some say operating system is a control program. So why? Because all the executions of programs, uh, managing the programs, managing the available external files will be handled by the operating system as well. So it controls multiple executions of programs, how inter-process communication will happen, So that means when processors communicate each other, how it can be happened, and if there are any errors in the system, how to progress the operating system. And there are certain mechanisms to prevent errors, and there are certain mechanisms to overcome the error when the error occurs inside the operating system. So overall, it monitors the current status of the processors, and it manages the processors, as well as it handles multiple processors and its communication for different users. So we can call an operating system as a control program as well. So all in all, operating system does not have a universal definition. So many define operating systems in different ways. So there's another definition, as you can see here. The operating system is defined as everything a vendor ships when you order an operating system. So like this, there are many different versions. So some may correct, some may not be fully correct, right? So the correct explanation I have already given in the previous slides. So another definition is it defines an operating system as one program that runs at all time on the computer, right? So in some operating systems we call it as a kernel. So every operating system will have is having a kernel where you can run the kernel and the supporting applications, and sometimes the kernel will be binded with different use applications which produce different different versions, or we can call it as different flavors of operating systems. Right, so today's operating system goals are different because mainly focusing on micro devices and mobile devices. So the devices will have limited number of resources. Based on that, we have to optimize the operations and the activity inside the operating system. So some can be specific, like certain military devices. The operating system requirement is specific for that particular device, and the device has specific tasks to run and specific number of specialized applications running on it. So today's devices require highly specialized operating systems and optimized usage, convenience to be considered. So you can see in the picture there are different devices which are used in different contexts. So their requirements are different. Some may be requiring real-time data processing. Some might require 100% accuracy. So like this, based on that, the operating system should be able to facilitate each of these devices. So when a computer starts up, we need to consider few things. So one important aspect is called as the bootstrap program. So the importance of this bootstrap program is when we turn on the power to the computer system, it tries to execute the available instructions. So that is available as a bootstrap program. So what happens when we execute the bootstrap program is it will initialize all aspects of the system and check whether all the devices are correctly connected and the status of the available devices. Then after confirming the device status that is available in the system, then it will load the operating system and the necessary components to the RAM. So then after that the operating system can start its instructions. So now we'll see what is a bootstrap program. So when we switch on the computer system, the system will load the bootstrap program and start executing the instructions available in the bootstrap program. So as I explained earlier, bootstrap program will execute its instructions to check whether all the available devices are correctly connected and functional. So when the bootstrap program completes its initialization of the computer system, it will then load the operating system to the random access memory, that is the main memory. So after loading the operating system to the main memory, then the operating system will start its first instruction and keep on running the operating system. So in the diagram we can see the basic operation when we start up a computer system. So bootstrap program runs initially. So what happens is it will run and check the device status and the functionality. Then it loads the operating system to the main memory, and then the operating system will start its execution from the first instruction. So operating systems are interrupt driven. So what do we mean by that statement? Now for an example, we can start opening a word processor. So in that case we click on the word processor icon, maybe on the desktop. So when we click on that particular icon, it creates an interrupt to identify there's a task that is being executed by a user. So each particular task, whether to open a document, save a document, close, to print a document, everything will be indicated to the operating system through an interrupt. So that is why operating system is called as it is driven by interrupts. So when we want to do a particular task, we do the higher level task. That means we close the application, open a file, copy to a different folder, or create a folder. So each time the operating system will identify the task by a interrupt. So there are multiple interrupts available to identify different types of tasks inside the operating system. So those are available in interrupt service routine. So in the interrupt service routine, we'll have the necessary code or instructions when a particular type of an interrupt occurs inside the operating system. So interrupt will have a specific code to identify the code available in the interrupt service routine. So whenever we execute or do a particular task inside the operating system, it will execute the interrupt, which receives the interrupt ID, and it will search on the proper interrupt service routine. So it can start executing the instructions available in the interrupt service routine to handle that particular task. So there are different types of operating systems that implements interrupts differently. So however, the operating system will have its own CPU based interrupt generation. So CPU will generate an interrupt, or else a software can generate an interrupt as well. We call it as a trap. So so this is how an operating system identifies an interrupt, and how an interrupt occurs inside the operating system, and the main functionalities. So interrupt will transfer the control into the interrupt service routine, where it has the code what to do with that particular interrupt through the interrupt vector. So the interrupt vector will have the specific address for that particular service routine. So when the interrupt happens, the execution that is relevant for that particular interrupt will start executing. So so that is why the operating system is called as interrupt driven. So this is an example of a interrupt vector, where each of these interrupts will have its address as well as the purpose for each particular interrupt. So when an interrupt occurs inside the operating system, there are different ways of handling an interrupt. So one is called as polling, and the other one is called as vectored interrupt. So separate code will be used for different types of interrupt handling inside the operating system. So when we consider batch system, so that means many functions will be given the execution one by one as a batch. So in polling, what happens is the device will set a flag indicating it is busy. Then the program will test the flag in a loop waiting for completion. So for an example, let's say we have a printer, and the printer will have several printing jobs. So when the instructions are executing inside the printer, the device controller will indicate the device as busy through a flag. So in polling, it will check in a loop whether the flag indicates busy or idle. So inside the loop, it will check the status of the device, and in the available vectored interrupts, it will wait until the IO operation completes. Then the device will indicate the necessary service routine, whether that particular task has completed. Then after receiving the task completion in instruction, the CPU or the device can execute another process, or the CPU can execute another process. So those are the two different ways of handling interrupts. So you can discuss the difference between interrupts, vectored interrupts and polling. So as I explained earlier, So if we take a simple example like this, you can clearly understand the difference. So polling is like picking up the phone every few seconds to see if a call has arrived. So interrupts, on the other hand, is like waiting for the phone to ring. So that is a simple way of explaining the difference between polling and interrupts. So if I explain again, polling means it will check in a loop for a device whether that device is busy or idle. So let's say every 10 milliseconds it will check inside a loop and check whether it is busy or not. If it is idle, then that means the device is free. Another process or set of instructions given to that particular device again. So vectored interrupts are not like that. When the device completes its execution, it will indicate by a flag. So after getting the signal from the device, it will provide additional processes or uh, instructions for that particular device. So that is the difference between polling and vectored interrupts. So in computer organization, we can see there are number of devices, and the devices uh, are connected to the main memory, and then we have each particular device will have a device controller. And so in modern computer systems, each disk controller or each device controller will have its own memory. So it is easier to manage because we can store multiple jobs for each device in the device controller. So the device controller will handle the devices and the requests in a efficient and a proper manner. So that is very important when it comes to controlling the devices, because in modern operating system it allows to execute multiple processes, and so we call it as multitasking system. So we can run many processes, and we can allow a particular user to run many applications. So in that point, we need to manage the disks or any particular devices which are attached to the computer system in a efficient and a proper manner. So memory cycle. So we will discuss about the memory cycles and how the memory management is being done in the operating system in detail in a later on chapter. So when we consider a memory cycle, we consider a read and a write. So in some cases we might consider reading or writing separately as a memory cycle. So we can search for a particular set of instructions when we read, or else we can write certain instructions to the main memory in the right um, step. So mainly some we consider memory cycle as read write. So we will discuss on memory cycles, how memory is being managed separately in a separate chapter. So as I mentioned earlier, different operating systems will have its different structure, different design, uh, different number of applications, and different way of communicating from the operating system to the hardware. So this is a diagram where it illustrates Unix, Linux operating system. So it's a multi-use environment at the front end. That means many users can use a single computer system, and they have their preferences for different applications. They can install different applications for them, or can be used commonly as well. So either of these applications and utilities will be connected to the kernel. So kernel is actually the main program in Unix operating system or Linux operating system, where it has different types of applications and utilities bundled with the Linux Unix kernel. So based on the variety of applications and utilities, we call it as different Linux flavors. For example, when we take a Debian flavor, it has different set of application programs and different set of utilities. So when we take Ubuntu, it's a different set of applications and different set of utilities. But the main core functionality in both would be very much the same. So in certain Linux flavors, certain functionalities can be optimized, but in many Linux flavors, the kernel is kept as a common resource where we can install the new updated kernel and run the same operating system with the existing applications and the utilities. So the basic components of an operating system, we can divide it like this. So normally operating system will provide a user interface, whether it's a graphical user interface like Windows or a command line interface, or it can provide the both services. So in addition, the operating system will have a memory manager, where it's very important to manage the memory in different levels. And then we have the process manager, where we have to control and efficiently process the instructions available in processors. Then we have to manage the devices. So all the devices should be managed efficiently, as well as protectively from threats as well. And then we have the file manager. So different users will have their private files as well as public files. So private files should be isolated and public files should be allowed to access by different users. So like this we can categorize the components of an operating system. So we will discuss about the services which are provided in the operating system in detail in the second chapter. So a question: what are the main components of the central processor unit? We call it as the CPU. So the CPU consists of 4 components, that is program counter, instruction register, address register, and the arithmetic logic unit. We call it as the ALU. So what is the program counter? The program counter will hold the address of instruction that is currently being executed. So the instruction register, which will hold the instruction being executed in the operating system. So we can see the difference, the program counter which holds the address and register which holds the address of the operand, and the arithmetic logic unit which carries out the current instruction which are being executed at the moment. So these are the four main components of the CPU. So the operations we can identify in different forms. For example, when we take I/O devices in the CPU, so input-output devices and the CPU can execute concurrently, because in modern operating systems, CPU will be getting the details from the main memory and start its execution. I/O devices will be managed by the device controller, so it has certain power in certain devices as well as a buffer, a local buffer for each device controller, where it can manage its own multiple devices as well as multiple jobs. So the devices will be able to control its own functionality through the device controller. So the CPU and the main memory will be also connected to the device controller. We call it as direct memory access, DMA. That is one functionality we have in the modern operating system. So without the intervention of the CPU, the information can be directly loaded from the main memory to the device controller to execute the available instructions. So that saves time for the CPU, where the CPU can be used to utilize for another process to be executed. So like this, there are certain advantages in modern operating systems. So when we consider the operations inside the operating system, CPU usage and the device usage, so the CPU will have two states. One is execution and idle state. So in this particular example, you can see the CPU will start the execution of a user process, then it creates an interrupt, and then it moves the functionality to the input-output device. So input-output device initially was idle, then it receives the instruction and start operating the instructions, and then it can be functional after a while. So after completing the input-output operation, again it will indicate to the necessary service routine through the interrupt, and now the service is completed, or the task is completed. Then after that, the CPU can again start its execution. So the input-output structure is very important in operating system. So the CPU will be most of the time it is busy executing multiple operations. So so the new process which is ready to execute has to wait until the CPU completes or terminates a particular process. So in the input output request, it will take some time, because sometimes processors may not finish its execution in the first usage of the CPU. So the CPU will give another chance to the same process after a while. So in that case, the available process has to wait inside the memory until it completes its execution. So you can see when it comes to input output devices, so better controlling is required, and uh, better management is required, because a process might get involved in different states. So one state is it can use the CPU. In another state it can be waiting for the CPU to be accessed. So also it can wait for input output operation as well. So so to manage this, there's another feature in the operating system. We call it as a system call. So using the system call, we can communicate for the application for the input output device. So when a system call is called, the operating system will check whether that particular device is busy or not. If not, it can be granted to execute using the particular device. If not, it has to wait until a certain device complete its operation. So always the device status will be indicated in a device status table, whether the device is busy or not. If busy, what is the particular process which is being executed at the moment, and then what are the next available jobs to be considered. So that is how the input output structure works inside the operating system. There's another concept, we call it as direct memory access. So so what happens is, every time if a particular process needs to go through the CPU for a particular task, and their instructions are also going through the CPU to the particular device, so it's a overhead for the CPU execution. So in this direct memory access, what happens is, when a particular task is initialized, the CPU will process its task, and the instructions will be passed to the particular device. So after that, the set of instructions to be given to the device will be directly passed from the main memory for the device controller. So device controller will have its own buffer, and in some device controllers will have its own processing power as well. So it will manage the available data through the buffer in the device control. So it will reduce the usage of the CPU and maximize the throughput as well, because when that particular set of instructions are directly transferred from the main memory to the local buffer of the device controller, the CPU can start executing another process. So that is the advantage. So we can utilize the CPU more for process execution, as well as we can speed up the computer system. So you can see in this example, so how it works. So the main instruction for a particular process, when it is initialized, it will be going through the CPU, but after that the set of instructions which are to be extracted from the main memory will be passed to the device controller. Then the device controller will directly connect to the main memory and get the necessary instructions directly from the main memory to the device controller. So in the conventional way, what happens is every instruction should come through the CPU. So you can see it's a huge overhead. So if we manage the processing and device controlling in this manner, we can save the CPU for other program execution.